Now, specifically, what I tried to capture in this piece is kind of how is this concept I've been developing called narrative discipline. And I've been refining it over the last year or so. And the basic idea of narrative discipline is that the boundaries of debate are clearly set so players know where not to tread. But when those boundaries prove to be inaccurate, they can be changed, but only by establishing new boundaries that no one may step outside. And the narrative discipline is a function of social control, which is to say how you can, well, control the population at large. And control doesn't mean you have a chain around your neck or you're being led on a leash. Control me is closer to like, well, I'm gonna bump you a little bit this way, right? You can't really, if you, as far as I understand, like moving herds of cattle, you can't really get them to go the direction you want. You have to try and like pivot them off one. You have to try and get behind them from one way and move them a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time. That is effectively what I would argue the media does for a society at large, right? And any kind of media or government structure as well. So like the point is to say what I spent too much time developing the concept and I forgot to put it I forgot to say why they actually did start telling the truth, which is that we have internal passports in the United States of America, and those more than likely aren't going anywhere, right? Like in most major cities, and I live outside of one of them. In most major cities, if you don't have the proper documentation, you cannot get into an establishment, and that it's a brand new thing that hasn't existed in this country before, and in fact would be considered un-American up until 2 years ago. The idea, and in fact, the entire premise of the constitutional order is built around the idea that you have free travel throughout the United States. And so in December, what we saw was there was a flurry of court cases, and it wasn't quite sure what was going to happen with Biden's OSHA mandate. And then it was struck down, and then it was like reinstated briefly. And in that moment, right after Christmas or right around Christmas, which is when people are paying less attention to the news, right around that time, you saw a number of cities follow New York's lead and implement some kind of a vaccine passport. And you saw all of that, and then the new year hits, and suddenly we're talking more openly about the lab leak hypothesis. Suddenly we're talking about myocarditis. The CDC recognizes myocarditis as a side effect from these vaccines. Suddenly, now we're on to Joe Rogan, but for a little bit of time, right? Joe Rogan was just having these people on, and the narrative had to shift, I think, because of that.